I'd like to thank all the deputations for coming. We're going to start the second session now. We have overrun a little bit. So first of all, I'd like to welcome all the deputations and individuals once again attending our meeting. We also have government officials present today, and they come from the EPD and the AFCD. So if you have any comments, the officials will be also able to make a response. For those attending the meeting today, you may use the headset to listen to the simultaneous interpretation. Channel 0 is the floor language, Channel 1 is English, 2 is Cantonese, and 3 is Putonghua. Each deputation will be given 3 minutes to speak. Please also note that your comments or submissions will not be protected by the LegCo's Powers and Privileges Ordinance. There is also a document in relation to matters to know when attending meetings in the LegCo chamber, and you'll find all the security measures there. It's actually affixed to the circular sent out to you earlier. It's also tabled today. For those in the public gallery, you may obtain a copy of that circular from our security staff. So if you have any submissions that you have brought along, you can put down the name on your submission and hand it to our secretariat staff. So without further ado, Mr. Alan Seaman, your turn.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here today. I know normally I don't attend this kind of thing, but I felt for Hong Kong it's a very, very important subject. I know it's very controversial, but everything in Hong Kong is controversial today. First of all, around 33,000 African elephants, which is one every 15 minutes, are being slaughtered for their ivory tusks each year, in large part due to supply-demand in this part of the world. Since the international ivory trade ban in 1989, domestic markets like Hong Kong have provided laundering mechanisms for poached ivory and perpetuated the demand. Study found that most of the ivory sold here was being smuggled illegally to mainland China. Much of the ivory legally acquired in the 70s and 80s was obtained from poached elephants from Africa, losing more than 600,000 elephants over that period. Now that got me very angry, actually. Elephants are iconic species that are just like us in many ways. Emotionally, they're very human with the same sense of family and death. To kill such an animal for such a tooth, for which to fashion a trinket or to show wealth is morally unacceptable and totally incomprehensible. In 1970, there were around 70,000 black rhinos. There are now about 5,000. At this rate, the only elephants and rhinos our grandchildren will see will be the few remaining in zoos, and their children will only read about them in textbooks. And that, to me, is very, very terrible. I appreciate the Hong Kong government very much for taking concrete action to ban the local ivory trade, and hope this can be done as soon as possible, as I'm here today to urge all Hong Kong lawmakers to support this government's proposal. The United States has already closed its market, and China will also do so by the end of the year. So there's no way that Hong Kong should not follow this international trend. Hong Kong should be leading this trend, not following. The African elephant is doomed to extinction in 15 to 20 years unless we can put a stop to it. There's only one way to save them, and for future generations, we must ban the ivory trade. I know it's very, very difficult. I know that there's two sides to the story. I know there's traders who have been in the business for many years, but there's a difference now between young generation and old generation. Young generation cares about environment, they care about animal protection, they care about all these things, which were not so important to our parents or to people like myself. But today, young people are much more aware. And I can understand the African traders who it's been part of their life, part of their business.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Alan Seaman.
Ms. Chen Po King, thank you. I am ordinary citizen of Hong Kong, I like to, express my view as a citizen of Hong Kong. When I was young, ivory products were very common. You find them in Chinese emporium. They're even sold in wet markets. You have, shreds of ivory tusk people used to make soup, supposed to be good for our bodies. So ivory was a part of our everyday lives. When I was young, in 1989, there was a ban on ivory trade. And I thought, when I was very young then, and I knew that when I grew up, I wouldn't see ivory products being sold all over the street. Indeed, it is true that you can't buy ivories in wet markets anymore, but it's still being sold in the counters of department stores. I thought that this trade will gradually be phased out because the ban was started in 1989. It's more than 20 years ago. I'm already an adult. I have never imagined that when I grew up I would be here today and speak on behalf of the Africans in Africa, which is nearing extinction. I know, and I learned from the news and documentaries and my traveling in Africa that about 30,000 elephants are being died, all because of the tusk. Because of our greed, they are suffering. I think that is a very accurate description of what is happening. I understand that the ivory traders now are demanding compensation because of the ban. I object the use of public funds to compensate people and to protect their commercial interests. The ban was already implemented decades ago. The trade has several decades time to dispose of the stock. And even now, today, they're asking for compensation, and this is not right. Other than that, some people say that ivory sculpting is part of Chinese culture. What I like to say is that if in our traditional culture, our culture will result in human beings and animals suffering from unnecessary harm, that we have to ponder whether we should, carry on with such a tradition. In fact, we have discovered many bad aspects of our tradition, like women, for example, wrapping up the feet in the Qing dynasty, which causing a lot of hurt for the young people, for women. In the past, it was a tradition to eat dog meat, but nowadays we are more humanitarian. We don't eat dog meat anymore, and the law doesn't allow that either. Same for ivory trade. It is causing the elephants to go into extinction. We therefore must put an end to this tradition. I'm very happy to see the government now proposing that there should be a ban. Next, Ms. Cheng Shui Han. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I strongly object to eliminating the ivory trade without compensation. Hong Kong is a place where there is rule of law. The ivory stock that we have been acquired legitimately 30 years ago. They are old stock. They are our private properties. Article 6 of the Basic Law and Article 105 says that the government will need to protect the people's private properties. If this bill became law, 5 years from now, our ivory stock, if we continue to trade in the stock that we hold, will be subject to a very severe penalty. We are treated even more harshly than drug peddlers. Isn't that a deprivation of our right to use our property, and isn't that a breach of the basic law? I'd like to urge members to act according to the law.
And President Xi Jinping has proposed the great revival of the Chinese nation, and we need to revive the Chinese culture to allow that to happen. And ivory is part of the fine Chinese culture. And we have very finely and delicate ivory rings, which is highly valued both by local Chinese people and other people, the very essence of Chinese ivory culture. And the ivory trade is not a crime. we take the material from nature, and we utilize resources from nature. We can take ivory. We can take the tusks from dead elephants. This will be a wise way to use natural resources. So why is the government so insistent on destroying this particular intangible cultural heritage of the Chinese people? There are many ways that we can protect the wild elephant. It should not be achieved through the elimination of a fine Chinese tradition. I'm more in favor of protecting wild elephants, but we should also comply with the basic law to protect people's right to private property and also the fine Chinese culture. Thank you. Ms. Ng Mei Feng from the Exchange Promotion Association of Suzhou and Hong Kong. I'm offering my comments as a businessman, an entrepreneur. In the old days, it was customary for people to offer ivory chopsticks as gifts, but now we don't do it anymore. I started my business in the garment industry. In the past, Hong Kong enjoyed a lot of thriving manufacturing industries, plastics, shoe manufacturing, and other manufacturing industries. The manufacturing industries trained up many skilled labor and workers. And since the moving of the industries to the north of the boundaries, the industries had to find ways to adjust. No assistance could be existed from the government, but there were the Hong Kong Productivity Council and the VTC to offer training. In the past, we rely on OEM. We manufacture clothes and other products based on the design of the customers. But now we want to have original design manufacturing, ODM. And then we also want to have OBM, original brand manufacturing. We want to create our brands. We are always making improvements. And now the garment industry is the fashion industry. Of course, we appreciate that ivory is no ordinary art. Back in the 1990s, the government made it very clear that we would have to comply with CITES. At that time, the value of ivory dropped very significantly. Investment in ivory became very risky. And then the government also spent $5.88 million to train ivory workers, and the workers were also given an allowance of $2,000 a month. And now 27 years has passed, and we're talking about a trade which was informed to get transformation 27 years ago. Over the years, the government spent $19.3 million to hire people to tackle the smuggling. So why do we have to continue to spend public money to assist the trade, which is involved in smuggling? Next, we have Mr. Tam Si Hon from Hong Kong University Student Union. Our members are students of the Hong Kong U, which are concerned about conservation. We need to protect wild elephants because they play an important part in the ecology. Well, they are at the top of the food chain, and elephants also spread seeds for plants. But now they are targeted because of the tusks, and now we have a dwindling elephant population. Well, because if you kill one in the herd, the others will be at risk, and young elephants may die because of lack of care, and some of the other elements would also suffer emotionally for the loss. And elephants reproduces very slowly. For people, we have other choices if we don't use ivory, but for species, the loss is forever and permanent. So we must protect whatever we have in the population, in the elephant population. So why is it that the government wants to ban ivory trade? If we are we agree to protect the elephant, because if there's trading, there will be poaching. And if trading is allowed, then for existing stock, then ivory that will still be regarded as a tradable commodity, and poaching can never be stopped. We can only stop poaching by banning the trade, and this is the right step to take. Some people may think that we would just create a black market. But it's important for the government to disseminate the information that protecting the elephant is an imminent and important task. Therefore, my union supports all the proposals in the government proposal. Mr. Zhang Chapman. My name is Zhang Chapman. Would like to ban all ivory trade immediately. Only elephants are entitled to use their tusks. And 30,000 elephants have been killed, and 90% of the subspecies have disappeared. According to AFCD, from 1990 to 2016, Hong Kong seized 41 tons of smuggled ivory. Hong Kong has become a smuggling hub for ivory. So the proposal to ban the trade is based on the need to protect the environment. It's in the public interest. We're not forcing the trader to hand over their ivory. We are not affecting their right to hold on to their possession, to their stock. So the government has no obligation to compensate these traders. Poachers will have to cut open the head in order to get to the tusk. And sometimes the rangers will have to be killed. For example, today we have 2 rangers in attending this meeting as to tell us that what's happening on the ground, and this is illegal as well as immoral. So how dare these traders are now asked for compensation? And the State Council has already announced that the ivory trade will be banned within this year. But for the government in Hong Kong, the last date for ivory trading is 2021, according to the government proposals. As long as you are trading in pre-1990 ivory, since the implementation of CITES, these ivory traders have got 27 years to dispose of their stock. No more time should be given. And there are also illegal traders who try to pass off recently smuggled ivory as old stock, pre-1990 old stock, in order to sell them. The AFCD has prosecuted 2 such traders. One of them is the vice chairman of a trade association in ivory, but they were only fined $2,000, hardly a deterrent. So I urge the government to ban local ivory trade immediately. and there should be a stricter punishment to tackle trading in endangered species. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chan Kin Sing. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the panel. My father, my uncle, and my grandfather are all in the ivory trade. They have been doing it for many years. And it's really hard labor. And they have spent a lot of money on acquiring the raw material. And in 1989, because of the ban introduced by the government, the business deteriorated markedly, and our stock and our products have to be kept somewhere. So it comes at a cost to us. Putting them in a warehouse incurred costs. And now the government is proposing a total ban in 2021 without compensation. Our money in the form of the stock would be lost. We will suffer a lot financially. And if you consider the chicken, cow, and the surrender of the poultry traders, they all got compensation. Why are we treated differently? We're talking about legally imported raw material and legally made products. There's nothing illegal about that. So why is it that the government won't pay us compensation or buy our stock, buy out our stock? Now the transition allowed is just 5 years. It may not be sufficient for traders to dispose of the existing stock. Maybe the grace period can be extended so that we have more time to deal with it.
On the other hand, the government could set aside a place so that we can register the finished products, and if the government would consider buying them from us, there could be a place where these products could be put on display for people to appreciate. Thank you, Mr. Chan, for that suggestion. Ms. Chen Ching Yi. Good afternoon. I'm here today to talk about the ban which was implemented in 1989. All our ivory products have been registered. They've been put into our stock for 27 years. Of course, if you rent some premises to stock up the ivory, it's been quite expensive. Bearing in mind it's 27 years. We imported the ivory legitimately. They were approved by the AFCD. I don't understand why some people are saying that we are illegitimate ivory traders and saying that we are slaughtering we associate us with the illegal poaching. We registered the ivory in 1989. All the stock are old stock. We don't have any new stock. And when there are very few people now in Hong Kong who buy these ivory products, how can we dispose of our stock in 5 years? And we're not allowed to export. The government is putting out notices appealing to the tourists not to buy ivory products, otherwise they will be in breach of the law. So how can there be any business for us? The ivories are private properties. Why is it that after 2021 we are not allowed to sell them? What is the rationale for that? We understand there is a need for conservation, but because of conservation, our private properties are being deprived of us. Is that right? If the government were to implement a total ban without giving us any compensation, then we wouldn't be able to accept that. If your properties, say if you have an apartment, it's like what is happening in China, people would take away your property, would you accept that? I mean, it's the same logic here. I hope the government will really be considerate of ordinary citizens like us, although there are not many people in the ivory trade, but the 77 kilotons, it's still a substantial quantity in my opinion, and they are our own private properties. We have very old craftsmen in the industry. They think that if we could dispose of the store, they could recoup some of the money to help them retire. Some people said that in China and other countries, they are now imposing a total ban on the ivory trade already. But earlier in Africa, there have been ivory which has been auctioned and they were sold to Japan and China, where they are sold domestically. What kind of ivory are those? Why were they allowed to be auctioned legitimately? And they were able to trade in those ivory products. Could anyone explain that to me? Why? It's right that we can help some of the traders, transform the business, but that would take time and money. So I hope that you will be able to, render us assistance. Well, perhaps the officials, when they respond, they will be able to answer your questions. Mr. Hauptmann.
At today's important meeting on phasing out the local trade in elephant ivory. I had planned to make this intervention entirely my own, but yesterday I received a letter from 3 people who spent many years investigating the global movement of illegal ivory back in the 1980s and 1990s. What they have to say is of critical importance, so please allow me to begin by summarizing their points. Number 1, Hong Kong was at the very center of the illegal trade in ivory during the 1980s. Number 2, hundreds of tons of poached ivory were laundered into the system en route from Africa through the Middle East and onto Hong Kong. 3, ivory traders in Dubai, Ajman, Singapore, Taiwan and South Africa were interviewed in 1988 and 1989 and all stated that their illegal ivory was destined for Hong Kong. 4, fake CITES certificates could be bought in Hong Kong for as little as £5. 5, customs agencies generally estimate that they intercept 10% of illegal wildlife shipments. Given that Hong Kong has seized around 35 tons of ivory since 2003, we can safely estimate that 350 tons of illegal ivory have entered Hong Kong during that period. Now, turning now to my own points, Madam Chair, I would like to draw your attention to Tanzania's proposal to uplist the African elephant from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1, tabled at the 7th meeting of CITES in October 1989. The proposal was adopted by the parties and resulted in an immediate drop in elephant poaching and ivory smuggling. Tanzania's 1989 proposal strongly contradicts the narrative touted by the Hong Kong ivory traders today, in which they claim that their pre-1990 ivory stocks are all legal and taken from elephants that died of natural causes. The Tanzania proposal states that 1. There has been a very spectacular increase in the total number of elephants killed to supply the ivory trade. The present offtake was considerably above the maximum sustainable yield. 2. The illegal trade in ivory is massive and often difficult to separate from the legal trade. Document falsification and forgery are reportedly common practice, often concealing ivory's true origin. 3. If one assumes that the total ivory traded outside Africa in 1987 was around 691 tons, in brackets 771 tons minus 80 tons consumed in Africa, then approximately 94% of the ivory originated from illegal sources. 4. CITES is in fact facilitating the continuing unsustainable offtake of elephants by allowing for very large amounts of ivory from poached elephants to enter the legal international trade. That's the end of the quotes from the Tanzania proposal. The ivory traders have been deceiving Hong Kong and the rest of the world since the 1980s and must not be allowed to continue doing so. Enough is enough. Let's confine Hong Kong's ivory trade to the dustbin of history where it belongs. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hofford. 跟住係鍾慧音先生。
Next, Mr. Chung Wei Hun. Thank you. I strongly object to eliminating the ivory trade without compensation. I've been in the ivory trade for more than 30 years. I've always been law-abiding. Our ivory products were procured before 1989. We've been holding on to the stock since then. We call them environmental ivory because we buy the raw materials from Japan and we've held on to them until now. We still have such a large stock because since the ban in 1989, we are not able to export the ivory products. We just rely on the tourists to patronize our products. How can we sell the large stock that we have? I rely on the ivory business to support my family. I pay my taxes. I've made my contribution to Hong Kong. I've been in the ivory business for so long. But now in Hong Kong, the government is proposing to enact a legislation, and for 5 years from now, I won't be able to sell my ivory stock anymore. That would, deal a severe blow for me. My lifelong investment will be down the drains. But this is my private property that we're talking about. Every time we have meetings with the AFCD, they would tell us that 5 years from now, if you continue to trade in ivory products, the penalty, well, you'll be punished like the drug peddlers selling opium so we can give away the ivory products or donate them. Anyway, we have to dispose of our ivory within 5 years. The radical green groups have strong prejudices and misunderstanding of our business. They are trying to smear us so that even people who want to buy ivory products wouldn't patronize our business. If there are no customers, how can we sell our products? We're not allowed to export. So how can we sell our ivory products? We only asked, we advised that we should, treat our ivory products as, collector items. But what we stock are raw materials. So the officials should take the lead and buy these materials from us for private appreciation and collection. Why pass the buck on to us? Is that fair that you put the responsibility on our shoulders? Thank you. Ms. Samsho San. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to state my position. I certainly hope that the government will implement the ban on the ivory trade as soon as possible. Regarding compensation, since so many countries in the world already have implemented a ban on the ivory trade, and there is no precedent for compensation for the ivory traders, I think Hong Kong should not be any exception here. I have heard that there's been a 27-year disposal period for the ivory traders. So you have 27 years to clear your stock. It's such a long time, and yet you're still not able to clear your stock. It would either mean that there is no market, or some of the ivory have been illegally imported in Hong Kong. That's why you've never been able to dispose of the products. You can do a lot in 27 years. Two people can get married, and the grandchildren would have been born after 27 years. So I've watched a documentary at the Space Museum about the animal habitat, and the biologist said that as a mother, the most precious gift for her children will be a healthy planet. What is a healthy planet? On this earth, there are different species playing different roles. A healthy planet is not. It doesn't mean that since we're intelligent beings, we can kill the other species. But in order to make profit through the ivory trade, the lives of the elephants are being deprived. At least 2 rangers are killed every week. So Hong Kong is a trading city, and we've been criticized by green groups. The so-called legitimate ivory, lots of data have shown that these are ivory which has been smuggled into Hong Kong. Nobody would like to run a business that would lose money. If there's no profits, the ivory trade wouldn't be able to survive. So I think the penalty should be increased, so that if they are caught, they should be made to feel that the fine is so high that they shouldn't bear the risk, take the risk, and that they should not carry on with the business. My father has taught me that you can never have a career for life. Hong Kong has been transforming over the years. We have gone through different stages. We have the garment industry, the watch industry, the plastic flower industry, and people in Hong Kong always found a way to transform the career or businesses. Why is it that even after they've been allowed 27 years, they still dare to ask for compensation? There is no such precedent worldwide. Thank you. Ms. Anderson.
Legislators, I'm Astrid from HKU's Conservation Forensics Laboratory, and thank you for the opportunity to talk today. The future of elephants in Africa depends largely on government actions in Hong Kong. We urge the Hong Kong government to end all commercial trade in elephant ivory immediately and without any delay. There is a wealth of scientific research that shows that poaching of African elephants exceeds their natural growth rate and threatens this species with extinction. Forest elephants have declined by 62% in the decade following 2002, a study by Maisels et al. Reported in 2013. Over 30% of savanna elephants, meanwhile, were lost in just 4 years following 2010, a study published last year showed. Overall, in just 2 short years, between 2010 and 2012, over 100,000 elephants were killed by poaching. As mentioned, this imperils the very survival of this species. Meanwhile, forensic testing has proved that ivory obtained from this rampant and widespread poaching ends up in the markets here in Hong Kong. 5 illegal ivory shipments of over 500 kilograms seized in Hong Kong in the past 20 years have been examined by scientists. Dr. Wasser and his team's genetic tests found that the illegal ivory in these shipments came from African elephants. 90% of the shipments tested by Dr. Curling's lab with radiocarbon dating techniques were found to have come from elephants poached within 3 years of the seizure. These studies, published in 2015 and 2016 respectively, were then corroborated by AFCD's recent findings that illegal ivory originating from after 1990 was being sold in a shop in Sheung Wan. Hong Kong is, unfortunately, a major wildlife trading hub, where ivory from recently killed elephants is sold illegally. These studies prove that. Clearly, then, the future of elephants in Africa depends largely on government actions here in Hong Kong. We urge all LegCo members to end all commercial trade of elephant ivory immediately, without any delay. This situation is urgent.
Thank you. Thank you. 跟住係張永權先生，麻煩你。
Mr. Zhang Wing-Kun, Madam Chair, members, ladies and gentlemen, I'm more in favor of conserving wild animals. I have a long history with elephants. In the 1950s, I learned to carve ivory, and then many things have happened. There was a U.S. Import ban and Hong Kong export ban, and now you are going to ban trading altogether. But when I do the carving, well, I'm lost. I don't have other concerns. Well, we carve ivory into the art form. It can be about animals. You can have a small rose carved from a piece of ivory the size of a button. We would use every part of the ivory to the best of our ability to come up with a very beautiful artifact. We are all in favor of environmental protection. On the other hand, the AFCD burned 28 tons of ivory. The Kenyan government burned 105 tons of ivory, creating a lot of smoke, polluting the air. That's not environmental protection. If we ban the ivory trade, then the craft, the skills will be lost. What have we achieved? Through various measures to protect the element, we have been told by green groups that the elephant as a species will die out soon. But then there are also the people doing the birth control of wild elephant populations in some African countries. And some of the elephants have to be culled. And I believe the people of Hong Kong know which side is right. Well, I am more in favor of conserving the elephant, because without elephant, there's no ivory carving to speak of, and there's no way we can carry on with this fine Chinese tradition. Mrs. Pong from the International Allowance to Conserve Elements and Rhinos. Good afternoon. Elephants are wise animals. When they know that their kind or human beings are in danger, they know how to offer help. And now their numbers are dwindling. Can we just sit by and do nothing? Well, we Chinese people believe in karma. There will be a retribution for evil doing. If we lose our diversity, there will be knock-on effects, repercussions for the entire food chain, and other species will be equally affected. And very soon, human beings will feel what the results of all these. It's and smuggling of ivory tusks is just like other smuggling activities. They would use the money to support crime syndicates and even terrorism. And all national leaders around the world know this, and that's why the Chinese government, which is in itself the biggest ivory market, has announced a total ban of the ivory trade this year. If we do not legislate for this, we will continue to be a center for illegal ivory trade, and will be an accomplice in the extinction of the elephant. Members, well, your decisions will have affect everyone in Hong Kong as well as the entire world. The fate of the elephant is in your hands, and now leaders of all countries are paying attention to what will happen in Hong Kong. They will try to find out whether we are going to do the right thing or we would decide to do nothing. We should preserve this valuable species for our future generations. Well, actually, I admire the artifacts produced by Mr. Zhang's trade. But you have been given so long, a grace period to dispose of your stock. And you have time to use other material. You don't have to use ivory for your skills. The Hong Kong ivory trade has been given 27 years to dispose of the stock. And if we use taxpayers' money to compensate these people who made the wrong investment or who are trading in illicit or smuggled ivory, that would just not be right. We're talking about living elements. We're not talking about an ivory artifact or commodities called ivory. No, there's no time to waste. Hong Kong must ban ivory trade immediately. Next, Ms. Feng Bui-Ling.
I'm 11 years old and I am a year 7 student at the school KG5. 大家你好，我叫做冯贝玲，我今年11岁，我是
My name is Feng Bui-Ling. I'm a student of KG5, a grade 7 student.
These are one of the most intelligent species on our planet, and they are just as intelligent as whales and primates. Their brain is as complex as ours, as they are capable of learning, mimicry, play, altruism, use of tools, self-awareness, memory, and communication. Elephants understand emotions like joy, anger, fear, and depression. They are social, compassionate, and cooperative. They help one another when they are in trouble, and they are part of one big family, just like us. The worst part is that they are in danger of going extinct. We need to ban the ivory trade. 我支持香港政府相亚禁令. That consequences because the current measures don't work out. You may know that 85% of the ivory that's being shipped and traded in Hong Kong is illegal. Worse yet, speculators hoard the ivory, waiting for the price to go up. Because they are buying up more ivory to hoard, this encourages poachers in Africa to kill even more elephants. 我支持香港政府增加
I'm all in favor of increasing the penalty for trading in illegal ivory.
Taxpayers' money, because that would mean that we are rewarding the ivory traders and speculators for encouraging African poachers to illegally kill these beautiful creatures. And we don't want that to happen. Elephants are dying every day only for luxury, not for necessities like food or clothing. Every time we buy ivory from ivory traders, especially the speculators, that would mean we are paying the poachers for their bad deeds. They're not even using the entire animal. They're only taking the tusks, which means that the rest of the body will lay useless, and a beautiful, intelligent, sensitive, compassionate life that could have been saved is now gone. 我反对香港政府对象牙
I'm against offering compensation to traders for their stock.
Thank you so much for your time and effort.
Thank you very much， 多謝晒。跟住係李家豪先生係公民黨。
Mr. Lee Ka-ho from Civic Party. Good afternoon. All ivory products are mainly made from African elephant. It's one of the oldest mammals in the world. And in the last century, there were 10 million. Now it's just 400,000. In the past 10 years, the population of African elephant has gone down by 110,000. And why are they killed? It's just for the demand in the ivory market. Why is there such a huge demand? Well, you can have rings, bracelets, or big sculpture piece made from ivory. And we are familiar with chopstick made from ivory. People think that is high class, is a luxury item. And there are rumors that ivory chopsticks can tell you whether something is poisonous or not. And now, because of the human desire for ivory, the elephants are killed. In the last year's policy address, C.Y. Leung said he was concerned about the plight of African elephant, and legislation will be implemented to ban this. And this is one of the 50 odd animal issues raised in the policy address. Back in the 1990s, in order to comply with the convention, we have come up with this legislation on trading in endangered species and products. So thus banning the imports and export of ivory, but the pre-convention ivory was allowed to be traded. And since we are a free port, of course, the smugglers would like to make use of Hong Kong as a center for illicit trade. From 2011 to 2013, according to the government, there were 42 cases of conviction in the court for smuggled ivory. The fines imposed was just 2,500, and the most severe is just 8 months imprisonment. Compared with the huge benefits for smugglers, such penalties are no deterrent. Therefore, the Civic Party has strong reservations about the proposal to offer compensation to traders, because we already informed the traders of the export ban in the 1990s. They have more than 20 years to dispose of the stock, and additionally they are going to have 5 more years to sell their stock. We should introduce the trade ban immediately so that Hong Kong would be able to shoulder our responsibility as an international trade center in respect of trading in endangered species. I would like the government departments to respond to some of the questions raised by the deputations. So please be specific. Please respond to the questions and queries raised by the deputations. Madam Chair, I would like to make 3 points. Some of the questions were already answered in the first session. Some deputations refer to the property rights and whether the ivory will be confiscated. I have to say that we are going to ban. What ban is just a commercial trading in ivory. We are not going to confiscate the ivory products. The owner can still keep the ivory after the ban for appreciation, for display, and for giving out as gifts for non-commercial purposes. That is, as for the time allowed, well, last year we already issued some licenses which will be valid for 5 years for possession. For their possession. The proposal would involve 3 steps. 3 months after the ban takes effect, pre-convention ivory will be prohibited from imports and re-export. So this will prevent ivory coming to Hong Kong 3 months after the ban is effective. But the traders would give a number of years to be transformed.
就都提到一啲即係拍賣，即係90年拍賣象牙啊嘅問題，或者請漁護署啊陳生回應下。好，有請陳生。唔該，主席。
Mr. Chen from the FCD to elaborate on this point. Some deputations ask about the auctioning of ivory. In 1989, after the ban was imposed internationally, at that time, in 1999 and 2008, the Secretariat of the Convention, CITES, obtained consent from all the signatory states to conduct 2 auctions, which were on a pilot basis. They were all one-off exercises. In 1999, 50 tons of legitimate African ivory tusks were auctioned and were shipped to Japan. In 2008, a total of 102 tons of legitimate tusks were exported to China and Japan. When these ivory were being auctioned, the ivory ended up with legitimate, ivory traders. So there were 2 pilot cases which were done in 1999 and 2008. After that, there have been no further auctions. I must emphasize that the auction was conducted under strict supervision by the CITES Secretariat. It was only done on a pilot or experimental basis. Shall we stick to the 3-minute rule for the time being? Mr. Chen Hang-pan. Thank you. Several ivory traders have mentioned. I refer to the ivory, the traditional, craftsmanship of the ivory workers, and I also agree that protecting the white elephant is very important because it's a wild species. We shouldn't be poaching these wild species so that they will become extinct. But the traders own their own private properties, which are legitimate. If 5 years from now, the properties cannot be freely traded, it will become useless, it will lose its value. So it's like the currency issued by the Japanese occupation forces in Hong Kong during the Second World War. So this is actually depriving them of their property rights. When you enact legislation to ban the ivory trade, I hope the SAR government would tell us, that is, in the proposed legislation, will it be compatible with the basic law which promises that there will be protection of private property? Secondly, regarding some of the proposals put forward by the ivory traders, I don't think the government has responded to some of those, especially some of the deputations today who suggested that the government should set aside a place so that they can, store their ivory products, so they can take the ivory there, but they can take them out. And all the ivory items would need to be subject to radiocarbon test to prove that they are pre-convention ivory. And then they can allow for another 5 or 10 years to dispose of the stock, and while they will not be allowed to buy new ivory stock. The government has not responded to that suggestion. Mr. Au. Now, regarding the question regarding private property, as I said, we're not proposing to confiscate the ivory. It's just that after 2021, we will ban commercial trading. The ivory itself has aesthetic value. They also have an inheritance value, and those values will stay. We're just banning the commercial trading of ivory products. We've already sought legal advice from the DFJ, and also make reference of the WTO, rules. Well, we're talking about an international trend, that is the ivory market should be closed. And there's also an urgent need because the wild elephants are now under threat of extinction. So we therefore must implement this measure. Furthermore, we are providing for a 5-year transitional period. And furthermore, the traders would still be able to own the ivory, which is their own private property. And so there's a legal basis for our proposal, and we don't think we are jeopardizing any private properties. Could you also, all right, next, Mr. Silkafai, Chairman. Thank you. During the first round, I said that I support the green groups who have expressed the support to protect the wild elephants. I don't think anyone would support the poaching of wild elephants to obtain the tusk to make works of art. But the focus should be for the elephant tusks, which are already in Hong Kong, which have not yet been disposed of. Mr. Leung said that those are not, say the government is not going to confiscate these ivory tusks. Mr. Chen gave a very good example, the military yen issued by the occupation forces in Hong Kong. You say if they're doing something illegal, then they deserve the punishment. But then what they have been doing is legitimate. But you're now changing the goalpost today, and the government is refusing to make any compensation. I'd like to tell those people who love the wild elephants, I'm not saying that I support that the ivory trade should continue. I just want to ask why there are still so many European stock being shipped to Hong Kong. You're silent on that. All these stocks have been coming into Hong Kong so that the legitimate traders who thought they wanted to dispose of the old stock, many of the stock they hold come from, tusks taken from dead elephants. Why are you ignoring these people? The basic law, Section 105 said that we have to protect the private property of each and every every citizen of Hong Kong. You say the International Convention would not allow them to sell these goods. Many people in other countries said that they buy these works of art as collection. They will just keep them at home. But the people in Hong Kong told us that they rely on their craft to make a living. They now have some stocks. So we're talking about something different here. Yeah, right. It's all right if you don't allow them to trade, but what about the stock that still remains? 25 seconds. Regarding the outstanding stock, well, they can still put them use them in other ways. Mr. Chen suggests the government should buy these stock from them. Any form of acquisition was sent out by the government will send a wrong message. Even if we don't buy them, even if we give them a place to stock them, to store them, we will still be sending out a wrong message to the international community. Any second round? Dr. Yiu Chim Yim. Thank you. I agree that we should implement the ban earlier. For the two sessions today, we've not heard anyone saying that expressing any concern about the possession license for 5 years. Many of them instead said that if you allow for extend for another 5 years, more elephants will be killed. Since nobody is concerned about the 5-year period for the possession license, for the sake of the elephants, why don't we immediately put an end to it? Some people talk about private property rights. There are many laws which can override private properties. A simple example would be the town planning board could, for a piece of land, through its procedure, can rezone the piece of land, and the value will be gone the value of that land will be gone. Through a statutory channel, one could achieve the maximum public interest. And this incident arises from an international convention resulting in Hong Kong having to enact this piece of legislation. So what is important, I think, is that we should expedite this process. We don't have to wait for 5 years. And before we implement the ban, during the next few years, how can we ensure that there will not be any ivory illegally smuggled into Hong Kong? 2021 will be the third phase. After the enactment of the law, 3 months after, phase 1 will become effective 3 months after that. That is, we ban the import and re-export of pre-convention ivory, so that we can effectively reduce the quantity of ivory in Hong Kong. So the so-called ban only means the ban on import and re-export. Many possession licenses were issued last year, valid for 5 years. The AFCD has no authority to cancel them. But what is important is that we want to allow some time for the traders for the people to trade to switch to other jobs or industries. So if we could effectively ban the import, then we believe that these 3 steps are appropriate measures. Even if we allow them a few more years, they won't be able to sell the stock. Even if they grant them more time, there will still not be any people who want to buy them. They don't simply need the 5 years. We would need to allow time for them to change jobs. Strategy. Thank you. My position is that we should put an end to the ivory trade as soon as possible. My question is that I certainly would not agree to extending the ban, and that the government should buy back the ivory from the traders. I don't know whether we can come up with a way to work with the old craftsmen so that we can come up with a solution to safeguard their livelihood. That is, while we will not be sending out a message that the government is buying these ivory from traders because that will stimulate the more poaching in Africa. Has the AFCD considered whether they have considered any possible measure that they can take to cater to the needs of the old craftsmen? We are also concerned about the livelihood of these craftsmen. As I said earlier, the AFCD will work with the trade, will find out how we can help them. We'll be happy to hear them. Perhaps Mr. Chen could further elaborate. Do you have anything more specific regarding the transformation of the workers, especially the ivory craftsmen? We had earlier on conducted a survey to find out how many of such craftsmen are still engaged in the work of ivory sculpture. We know that the number is not large. Regarding these craftsmen, we are trying to find out whether there could be retraining programs we can offer them to help them change their profession. We've already liaised with the ERB, and they are offering many courses. If the ivory sculptors are interested in enrolling for these courses and acquire new skills to find another profession, I hope the department could be more progressive. The so-called Employment Retraining Board, I don't think that they will help when the old workers are 70, 80 years old. How can they undergo further training? We're still liaising with the ivory craftsmen. They've been engaged in ivory sculpture for many years. We want to know whether they want to sculpt other materials. If the ERB doesn't have any suitable courses for them, we can consider designing a tailor-made course so that we can leverage on their sculpting skills so that they can do something, they could find some work that which they can apply the skills. Before the second round, I'd like to ask whether there are other members who would like to ask questions. Ms. Elizabeth Court, 3 minutes. I'd like to thank all the deputations for coming to this council to share with us their views. I understand that banning the ivory trade is a very controversial topic. Indeed, in the last few years, I've been actively promoting the protection of the wild elephants in Africa, but many people in Hong Kong don't understand why people of Hong Kong want to protect the elephants in Africa, and what is the relationship here. And why is it that people who've been engaged in the ivory industry for so long would be treated like that? So over the last few years, I've been liaising with the people, with these affected parties. I've been to Africa twice in the last few years. I have personally tried to find out what are the problems facing Africa. I've been to Kenya and Tanzania. The first thing I did was walk into the Chinese embassy and talk to the ambassadors there to find out whether in Africa there is the problem of illegal poaching. And the figures quoted by the green groups, were they real? And how would the Chinese government see think of the accusation that Chinese people are the biggest buyers of ivory, the biggest smugglers of ivory, and how the Chinese people in Africa, we want to ask whether the Chinese people should take part in helping to protect the African elephants. I've met with the 2 ambassadors in Kenya and Tanzania, and they both told me that illegal poaching of elephant is real. The problem is real, and they also said that the policy of the Chinese government is that we should protect the endangered species. In the past, we might not have done very well, but in future, we certainly will try hard to do that. And both ambassadors told me that they have, asked the central authorities to ban ivory trade ASAP, and they wanted Hong Kong to also enact legislation to ban ivory trade ASAP. So that's why the Chinese government proposed last year that they would take 1 year. Starting from next year, there will be a total ban on ivory trade in China. In December 2015, I moved a motion which is supported by all political parties that we should enact legislation to ban ivory trade in order to protect the endangered species. This is something which really happens in this council. I understand that this would cause, dissatisfaction among those in the ivory trade. But at this day and age, we're still looking at, an animal species becoming extinct is something that I cannot accept. I therefore hope that Hong Kong will implement the ban ASAP. 5 years is already a long time. It's too long, in fact, because many more elephants yet will buy in the next 5 years, and many of the rangers will be killed as well. So I hope you understand my rationale and support the ban. Thank you. For this session, we're scheduled to finish at 5:40. The position of the Six Party is very clear, so I won't be asking any more questions. For the second round, we have Chen Hanbang and Siu Ka-fei.
Do we have other members who would like to speak in the third round? Ms. Elizabeth Kwok, so 2 minutes for each member. Mr. Chen Hanbang. The 5-year period allowed for further trading is not meaningful. According to ivory traders, there's no business. Over so many years, they have not been able to sell their stock. So the government should be more proactive about this. They should talk to the traders and the craftsmen on possible means to get this ended, and then your legislation will not be opposed. But now you want to pass a piece of legislation to take away their properties. You want to ban people's trade and some people's livelihood, but we don't want to see elephants die because of ivory, but we also don't want to see litigations rising from taking away of private property by government. Well, these craftsmen and traders know nothing, no little beyond the ivory trade. Well, you may say that they can change jobs, well, but we're talking about some skills that they value. I hope the government can be more proactive about this. By this I mean that I don't mean the government should buy out the store, but you should offer some space for stocks to be kept. You make sure that all this remaining stock is a pre-convention stock and not something of recent origin. So you can do this, and at the same time you protect property rights. Why is the government not going to do it? Mr. Siu Ka-fei. I think Mr. Chu Hai-tik pointing out the crucial point. It's not just impossible that anyone would support killing elephants so that the trade can have the material to continue the trade. But we're talking about the remaining stock. The stock they acquired legally, and they came from the elephants die of natural causes. We're talking about their properties. And the government keeps saying that they will continue to own the properties. Mr. Out, what the government proposal doesn't really make sense, does it? The ivory will be useless, will be valueless. Well, if it's a gold chain, a gold ornament, you can continue to wear them. But if you have gold bars and trading will be banned, what is the value of the gold bars then? I'm not saying that the trade should be continued to be in Hong Kong, but we're talking about how we should deal with their properties. Dr. Yu, you refer to the zoning of a town planning board. If I acquire a piece of land for commercial development, can the government rezone it to the agriculture, and then it becomes valueless? Can you give an example of that? Well, there are examples. I'll tell you after the meeting. If the old craftsmen are finding it difficult to make a living afterwards, I hope the government will be more ready to help them. According to some traders, they make a living in trading in ivory. I believe the governments have kept records over the years, over the 27 years since the ban. You should know more or less the business volume. How much is traded in Hong Kong over the years? But if the main business is no longer ivory, then the only implication for these traders will be the stock that they have. So we must consider whether this is really a question of dealing with this remaining stock. And also we have to consider the message that we would convey if we are to buy the remaining stock. Then I believe there will be a slaughter in Africa, and all the remaining stock outside Hong Kong would be illegally smuggled to Hong Kong. Is that the risk we are willing to bear? Maybe the government can advise us on these points. Well, there's a survey conducted by the AFCD. Actually, the business volume has been very low. And we have also learned from overseas experience. So far, no country or jurisdiction has offered compensation for the trading ban. Mr. Chu Hoi-tik, 2 minutes. I want to clarify a point. I hope Mr. Siu Ka-fai will understand my position better on this crucial issue, and that is if we allow the trade to continue, there's going to be no way we can stop poaching. So we need to have a compromise. We may need to have a compromise on private property rights. We may have no choice but to sacrifice the property rights in ivory. And I was saying that whether we can do even more for the craftsmen who are aging. I hope the government can do its level best to try to come to some agreement with the trade, as there's huge time. I don't think there's no need for the government to respond to that. I'd like to thank every deputation for coming, and whether in support or in opposition, we receive a lot of submissions. We'll continue to follow up the issue. And I understand that on the 2nd of June, the draft legislation was gazetted. The debate will begin on the 14th of June. So this will be on our agenda from now on. Thank you all for coming. I thank the officials, and I thank all the members for coming to the meeting.